so we both come from Arizona.
Yep. Yep.
And I just found out you worked at Atomic Comics in Phoenix.
I did.
On Peoria Ave?
It was by the Metro Center.
Yeah. Oh my God. I remember that shop. In fact, I think me and John Porcelino stopped there only a few years back. I guess they're closed now. I don't know if they're open anymore, but
yeah. So.
Yeah, we stopped there to sell our comics. Further humiliation. That's the theme of this channel and the videos is just the humiliation of being a cartoonist.
All facets, really.
It's nonstop.
Yeah, that place was funny. I was sort of like the alternative comics girl who worked there, and so I would try to steer people toward things I was interested in, which they weren't into. But it was fun. I learned a lot about not the industry really, but just kind of how it all worked. Got a great discount, and it was a fun summer job. Yeah.
Yeah, but so you were already into comics, and then you applied for a job there, and then they were like,
Yep.
And they were like, "What's your favorite comic?" And you're like, "8 Ball," and they're like, "We don't carry that."
Basically, yeah. that was probably my exact answer, to be honest. Yeah.
In the like 98 or something, or what?
It would have been like 97 or late 90s. Yeah.
You know what I always think of when I hear 97, like 1997, is I always think of the Cardigans song. That's the Love Me song.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah.
And Romeo and Juliet with Leonardo DiCaprio and Claire Danes.
Romeo plus Juliet.
Oh, yeah, plus Juliet. Yeah, that's right. So, you would pick that up as a designer.
Yeah.
Like that.
What can I say? I loved the 90s. It was a good time for me. I was living in Tucson. I went to school at U of A, and Tucson was really cool, I think, in the 90s. Still just this dusty, just kind of depressed town with lots of great old crumbling architecture that I would just snap photos of, be really arty, Yeah.
I was in Mesa, Arizona.
Oh, yeah. Mesa has some great old signage and
yeah, but it's just like a colony on Mars. I'm just like, no, human beings aren't supposed to live here. Like, that's how I felt.
It angers me, like, that people think this is a great place to live, and it's just, don't do it.
But I remember, like, oh my God, I'm just gonna talk about Arizona for a bit. I'm sorry. I remember our house, the yard was just rocks.
Oh, that's called desert landscaping.
Oh yeah, and it had like a crappy palm tree with like branches falling out of it and stuff. But they didn't put down like the plastic underneath the rocks, so like we'd have to go out there and like pull up weeds every day and just like get the little sharp weeds in our hands and stuff, and it was a nightmare. Did you ever draw comics or not?
I did. Oh yeah.
You published?
No. I did some like little minis that I kind of did print on demand. My one time at Comic-Con, I peddled a couple of things that I did like a splash page for Action Girl. I didn't do it. I pitched it for Action Girl.
Okay.
Didn't want it. I did a few just kind of stories here and there. I published in a few little zines in the 90s. Started drawing what I thought was going to be like my mega, it ended up being like 200 pages, how it is, it just gets out of your hands. And I think I got it like loosely penciled, and then I kind of was just like, I don't know that I want to do this anymore. I spent like a good 2 years working on it, and that was the end of of drawing comics. I mean, I always kind of feel like I want to go back and finish the story, like a feminist retelling of the story from Lot's daughter's perspective.
Oh yeah.
Very weird story.
For 200 pages.
Yeah. There's a lot of artistic liberties taken, like kind of what happened after the daughters got pregnant, and yeah.
Hey, you should do it.
Yeah. Part of the problem of in working in comics is, I don't know, I feel like you start internalizing a lot of the kind of criticism and sometimes snarkiness that happens, and then there's I can just hear like all of the, oh, that person, like,
well, Working at the Fantagraphics office probably didn't help you.
No.
There's a lot of snark in that office.
We are made of a lot of snarkiness, a lot of love, but a lot of snarkiness. Fantagraphics has evolved so much over the years. I mean, and I've only been there since 2013, so I can't really even speak to what it was like before then, but it just keeps getting more. I keeps getting, the office itself keeps getting nicer, for one. Like every time something floods, you know, Gary splurges for like new flooring or whatever, and more shag carpet disappears.
Yeah.
But it's kind of, it's evolving with the times and becoming a more tightly oiled machine, I think. And I hate to say it's becoming more professional, because that, I don't know, that has a lot of baggage around that term, but
yeah.
I definitely don't want to say bureaucratic, because Fantagraphics will never be bureaucratic. Yeah, but when I started, you know, Jen Vaughn was still there, and of course Jason Miles. Love Jason Miles. Really sad when he left.
Yeah, he left a couple times, I think.
Yes, he did. He did. I was so excited when he came back. Real icons of the industry, as you kind of know, production-wise, and cartoonists have worked there. So
you kind of gave up on comics for a bit to, I assume, like go back to school and learn design or something? Like how did you get
Yes, yeah, I was really into comics at university, at college. As a matter of fact, I love telling the story. Is we had to interview a typographer for an art, like we had to write an article and design it for a typography class, and so I chose Chris Ware. Ooh. And I found a Chicago phone book, and I think I had to go to the library and find a Chicago phone book, and I gave him a call, and he's like, hello. I'm like, hi, my name is Keely. Can I interview you for my typography class? He's like, sure. And so, and I remember he really freaked out when I was like, can I record, you know, a little like mini cassette tape recorder, can I record you? And he's like, I don't know about that. And then I ended up recording him. I need to find that tape. And yeah, he just told me about his methods of making type. So I incorporated a lot of comics into my sort of design education. And, you know, the idea that if you could have told myself back at university that I would be working at Fantagraphics, I mean, it's truly, I would have fallen over in excitement and disbelief.
You're doing the new Crazy Cat volumes?
Yes. Redesigning that series has been one of the best things that has happened to me in my career.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've had so much fun with it. It's been.
Well, what about this, Keely? Wasn't this?
Oh, I can't wait to talk about Fante. I was so happy when you said you wanted to talk to me, because I feel like people need to know about our process and the story of this.
I just hand you over a file, basically. I just send a file and say, here's the pages. Because I'm not a designer at all. I have no design sense. I'm like a storyteller.
I'm glad you know that.
Yeah, so like when it comes, that's what I really appreciate about Fantagraphics. And like I trust you as a designer so much that I'm just basically like, whatever Keely wants to do, she can do it. Because like I'll have like a general idea, like, oh, maybe it could look like this or something, and that's like all I can really contribute, because I can't come up with like an image that would make people want to pick up a book.
Right.
It just my brain doesn't work like that.
I mean, it's a very different thing, and it's so interesting to design for cartoonists, because they are image makers and they know what looks good, or they have an idea of what looks good, and yet design is a very different thing. A great illustration isn't necessarily a great cover, and a great illustration with some type on it also isn't necessarily a great cover. And you know, it's the struggle, the eternal struggle of the designer with a client, be it the client, you know, be an artist or Coca-Cola. It's just, how do you navigate that relationship? And there's a lot of humility in being a designer and having to step back and say, this is what the client wants. And then yet there's that pushback of, I want to educate them to know what they want. And so it's an interesting, you know, thing to think about in terms of your role as a designer. And, you know, in designing for cartoonists, there's everyone from do whatever you want, I trust you, to I don't trust you at all. This is my baby, and I am going to call the shots on this. And navigating that and trying to get to here, is always the challenge. And Gary's really good at having those hard conversations with cartoonists. Like, look, this isn't working, or how can we come to a consensus? Yeah. But yeah, then there's Noah, who just lets you do whatever you want.
Well, it seems like it works because it's so funny. Like, when people talk to me about Fante, half of what they want to say to me is about the design of the book, and the other half is about the work that I did. For every one, especially for the new one, it's like that's all I've been hearing about. It's so much fun putting something together like that. And same with, like, I remember that book we did called Disquiet.
Yeah.
That cover, and like the cover is like the best thing about that book.
That book was interesting. I loved cover. I was really happy with how that turned out. I'm glad people liked that. That's good.
It was like a movie poster or something.
Oh, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, and had a good time. I remember I enjoyed the texture. That, like, some books, you're just throwing you're throwing files to a whole nother continent, and then it comes back, and sometimes it's the biggest disappointment, and then sometimes it's like, yes, this worked, and that one felt very satisfying.
But you're not in charge of the paper stock and that kind of stuff, right? Like what kind of hardcover it's going to be?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
really?
yeah. We have. I mean, a lot of the paper, sort of restrictions around paper and stuff are just what our the plants in Asia have, and paper and caseboard and ink and certain finishes. All those prices fluctuate based on the market, and sometimes only certain kinds of interior paper is available. Like, we tend to not have a lot of choice about the interior paper. But we tend to have just like a standard matte art, which is kind of a coated, sort of thicker paper that the ink really looks good on. Yeah. But we don't have a ton of choice with like color of the stock, like if we want a creamy stock versus a bright white stock. But in terms of like the covers, if we want like certain textures or certain finishes, like a glossy versus a kind of matte spot sort of varnishes, or embossing or debossing or foil, we get to choose all that. And we're very spoiled. We're very spoiled as designers because we spend a lot of money on printing. I don't know if it's a lot of money, but we're never told like you can't do that, it's too expensive, or very rarely are we told that, because Gary and Eric want to see beautiful books, and they know that these are artifacts that people love to hold and cherish and collect, and so I keep saying I'll never ever have another job like this, which is part of why I can never quit Fantagraphics, because as a designer, it's just kid in the candy store sometimes.
So wait, who is this person on the picture that you used?
So that was a stock photograph of, I should know this answer. It was a stock photograph of some important writer or thinker. I can't think of his name. I should know this.
I've never had anybody know who it was, but people always ask me, and I'm like, I don't know who it is. I usually say like William Burroughs.
No, it was definitely not anybody. It wasn't a name that was sort of a household name. Mm-hmm. My original desire with that book was to like do a photo shoot with somebody who I keep wanting to do these photo shoots of Fante, and then they never work out. Mm-hmm. But to do a photo shoot of somebody in an office and put him on the cover. And then I was just playing around. I was like, this is actually kind of funnier maybe if I just do a stock photo and then just paste Fante's head really big on there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so the French publisher of it is this publisher called L'Employé de Moi. And one of the guys who works there looks exactly like Fante Bukowski.
Oh, I think I've seen that on social media.
And I went to like Angoulême, and they had printed like a big banner of Fante Bukowski for the back of the booth, because the one of the books had just come out there. And the entire show, he had to deal with people coming up and going like, "Is this you?"
Just kind of like, oh, just gonna shave off the beard, okay?
I felt bad. I was like laughing. He's like, "I know, I am ugly," and I felt really bad.
There's a little bit of Fante in all of us. I mean, John Fante and Charles Bukowski are books that are definitely on my shelves, which is part of why I wanted to take on this book, a series in the first place. I mean, Black Sparrow Press, I'll in researching your books, I just pull them right off my shelf. And
such smart designs on those, right? So basic.
Yeah. And can't remember the name of the woman who did them, but she was just kind of working quietly in the background. And, I think the people who love them kind of know who she is, but otherwise they kind of just disappear in that crystal goblet sort of fashion, They serve the book without being too loud or...
and I don't think like that. So I would never be able to get a cover, like, it was just like a couple geometric shapes and then just the title. And you're like, oh my God, it's brilliant. Like, I don't know how you do that.
Yeah. And they all look like they all, a Black Sparrow Press book when you see it. I don't think I'm not really sure what they're doing these days, but I think they stopped using that beautiful kind of art paper stock after a while. But they're like all watercolor. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They're always identifiable by that. And then just like the screen printing-esque sort of look to them.
Yeah. Yeah. When I worked at Kilgore Books, this bookstore in Denver, and man, those books would get stolen all the time. We had to put them where we could see them near the counter.
That's sad. But also,
But one time this guy stole them right in front of me. I was sitting there working and I was helping a customer and this guy came in and said, hey, how's it going? I'm like, oh, I'm all right. And he had his backpack and he just knelt down and grabbed a Bukowski book and put it in his backpack and walked out. And I was just like, what? I couldn't believe he just did that. I'm like, hey, wait a minute, sir. Like, I've never lived in a cool city. The closest to like a cool city I ever lived in was Denver. But when I lived in Denver, it wasn't cool.
It wasn't, right.
So I always kind of choose like a small, affordable place that I could just keep my head down, and do my work. And then you kind of get to hang out with like regular people. I never wanted to be like in New York City, be like a big shot or anything. I never wanted to live in LA. I just want a small, like little American town where I can just have my own little paradise there.
Yeah.
A small life is totally great.
Do you ever work like in coffee shops or?
Yeah, there's a really good coffee shop a block away that I'll go in. I used to go and hang out in and draw in. People that come up to you like, what are you working on?
Right.
And that's the downside of working from a city where they're not familiar with graphic novels, is that they're just so baffled. Yeah, they're like, are you a newspaper cartoonist? You in the newspapers?
Oh, you like Peanuts?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Actually, as a matter of fact, I share a publisher with Peanuts. So.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's pretty cool, actually. Yeah. No, I love working in cafes and stuff. Just that feeling of being alone in a space with other people is really, I find it very good for productivity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the energy. There's like an energy in there.
Yeah.
But you know what's weird though, Keely? Like living down here, everybody is like Christian. So I'll be sitting there at the coffee shop working, and if I listen in on people's conversations, people like these really young, attractive people that you would not think were church members are all sitting there having these like serious discussions about God and heaven and all this stuff.
That's how Springfield was too.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like every time I would go into a coffee shop, there would be some kind of devotional or Bible study going on every time. Yeah.
These are young, beautiful people. They should be hooking up and at like a house party, and shouldn't be sitting here talking about the afterlife. What's going on?
Yeah, that was great. I keep saying, like, I haven't lived in exotic places, but, I spent a good 4 or 5 years in New Zealand, but Missouri is truly the most exotic place I've ever lived. I was so like out of my element. Like, what is going on here?
Yeah. I've been working on like a big graphic novel about like the formation of the Mormon Church, like how it was founded. Yeah. So but that's the thing, is I'm having a lot of trouble with thinking of a cover, because it's gonna be called Joseph Smith and his Mormons. So I'm like, so I guess it should be Joseph Smith, like with a bunch of Mormons behind him. I have no idea. You know what I do is like on the color layer, I always turn it down to 77% because it prints darker. So it's always try and make it look a little, and also I like the colors to be behind the art, like so that you can really see the drawings. and they don't, the color doesn't.
Multiplying it or whatever.
Yeah, I don't like the color to interfere with that line work. You know?
I'm amazed, like when I've asked you for like a quick drawing or something, like how quickly you turn around color stuff. So you're doing that digitally then.
Yeah, digitally, and you know what I was doing? I didn't even have my desktop computer, so like all of Fante Bukowski 2, I colored on a laptop with a mouse with my 2 fingers on the trackpad, and
What?
And now one of my thumbs just like cracks all the time because after I was done with that book, like my thumb would just get stuck and I couldn't move it. I totally messed up my
coloring with a trackpad?
Yeah, with a trackpad with my 2 fingers, just coloring. Yeah, and I was broke. It's like that's the thing about comics. Like I remember that year when I was working on Fante 2, I made $8,000 that year, and like that's what I was living off of. And when I did my taxes, the IRS made me like fill out these forms about how I was able to live on $8,000 because they didn't believe me.
Right. You're lying, right?
Yeah, this is it. I'm gonna have to go out and get a job at the library.
Right.
And then
coffee shop. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then like the next day, something will come through, like an email. Hey, can you do this for me? I can offer this. But yeah, you probably do this too. Like I always take note of like what businesses say now hiring on their window. Like I always, if I'm like walking around.
Right.
I'll be like, oh, that hardware store's hiring.
Yeah, I could do that. I could see myself at a hardware store. Yeah.
All right. If things get really bad, I could just go over there. I could do that. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I remember I went to the Renaissance Festival in Arizona when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
It was the most depressing thing. I was like, this is not accurate.
There's no desert in the Renaissance.
Yeah, there's fucking tumbleweeds blowing through here. Like the wench is sitting here sweating.
Right, by a saguaro. Yeah, I have to say, desert goths are so hardcore, you know, because they're working hard to look real pale and you know, or in their black clothes, and that sun is just rough. So
like a leather trench coat.
Yeah.
Like, you know, they just smell so bad too when they take that off.
Yeah.
You know, in the second Fante Bukowski book, that the look of like Audrey is like partly based off of you.
That's what I heard. I heard. Yeah.
I had all these like Fantagraphics inside jokes like running through that series. You know,
well,
like,
and there's a Jack too.
The Jack.
Spelled exactly like Jack.
Yeah. And Audrey is supposed to be Mike Catron's daughter.
Okay, so it is the same. Okay, it is a Catron reference.
Yeah, I thought it'd be funny if like Catron had like a daughter who was like a famous author, so I just did that.
I love it. I was listening to a murder podcast the other day, and the guy who found the body was named Mike Catron, and they kept being like, and then Mike Catron, and I was like, Mike Catron.
Oh my god. It
was freaking me out. Yeah, it was not that Mike Catron though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Off to his friend Gary Grubb.
Right. Yeah. What are some other Fantagraphics references then?
Oh, so in the third book, his Fante's like agent is Conrad.
Oh yeah, okay, that's right. I remember Conrad and I laughing at that.
Yeah, Eric Reynolds is in there. I drew him in there, but I can't remember in which book or what scene. I drew somebody that was like a young Eric Reynolds.
I have to say, making Fante's zine was so fun.
Oh, you did such a great job with that. That looks so exactly like zines. Like, that's amazing.
Oh, I was just like, I remember when Eric was like, we have to put together the zine. Should I have no do? I was like, I'd love to do it. He's like, oh, I'm sure you'd be into it. And I was like, yes.
Yeah.
I had so much. I wish I could have spent more time on it even. Like, I wanted to go just like all the way with it. You know, I wanted to typewrite it. I didn't typewrite it because I created it when I was at the university, and I didn't have access to that. But like all the textures and like finding old yearbooks from like, you know, the 70s and photocopying them and because I mean I've known so many Fantes, and I've been a bit of a Fante at one point, you know. And I just really put myself into his shoes and tried to think of what he would want to include in that. So
when you're designing a graphic novel, like what information is even important to put on a cover of a graphic novel that, you know?
Yeah. Well, as you know, I mean, I have designed a couple of graphic novels that didn't even really or only minimally incorporated the artist's work on the cover, which always I find is an interesting challenge. Like, could that actually be a good way to sell somebody's book, is to not have their art on the cover at all? Like, do you look at a book cover as essentially like a poster or an advertisement for a book? Does it, what kind of information is going to pique the interest? And it could be the lack of information that's going to pique the interest. It could be something that feels slightly off, or slightly uncomfortable, that makes you want to kind of look more, and then possibly flip the book over and then get more information, or not. So I don't know. I think in general, a good place to start is to obviously have the cartoonist work on the cover. But I tend to gravitate towards a lot of hand-done solutions, and yet I don't want the book to be about my lettering or about my solution. It's kind of a tricky balance between my fingerprint on the whole thing, and also just kind of stepping back and letting the work kind of speak for itself. But
do you get nervous when you're, for example, the Crazy Cat volumes, you have to follow Chris Ware? I mean, is that terrorizing?
Yeah, a lot of pressure there. And it was another one of those, like, oh man, if you would have told me, I would have been trying to improve on Chris Ware's design, back in 1990, whatever.
Yeah.
But I think my thing with that is Harriman's work is so exuberant and joyful, and it feels so free, and yet it does have a structure to it. Is I really wanted it to feel playful and fun. I think Chris Ware's covers can have just, they're so beautiful and austere. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to move away from that. I wanted to move away from that kind of structural elegance and kind of get to the playful exuberance of his work. And so that first cover does feel, it's pretty modular and has a lot of kind of, it was all hand done. None of that was done.
Really?
It was all hand lettered. Yeah. And I wanted it to be hand lettered. Like, I could have so easily done that in Illustrator, but I didn't want that. I knew once you take something in Illustrator, you start getting caught up in the mathematical precision and using the shift key in order to get everything perfect. And I wanted to stay away from that. So I kept it all hand done. Of course, I cleaned a lot of it in Photoshop, but and then the second volume, I've done some really splashy hand lettering. So it's kind of moving, it's going to be interesting to see how that series kind of shifts from look to look without feeling too prescriptive, like here's a banner and here's something here and it's a series.
You're talking about Seth's Peanuts design, huh? Seth's Peanuts design all had the same.
Oh,
the banner.
I did the Disney Masters books too, which.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they are what they are, but very much just like banner at the top, banner at the bottom, some kind of lettering, and then an image.
Yeah, see, I think that makes sense for some series, like the Mickey Mouse ones or the Peanuts ones make sense. But for Crazy Cat, the whole point of those Crazy Cat Sundays is that nothing stays the same. Everything is exotic and different all the time.
Yeah, and there's so much formal experimentation, and yet there's nothing. I mean, they're very sophisticated. I mean, I love the notes in the back. Kind of calls out some of the interesting kind of factoids. And I mean, George Harriman was a total intellectual, and yet he wasn't. I don't feel like he was intellectualizing Crazy and Ignatz. I mean, it still just feels very, very fun and free. And I wanted to balance that sense of kind of formal experimentation without being too uptight or sort of afraid to be playful. And I think that's what's so fun about these books. Yeah,
I would say that is your signature style. When I think about the books you designed, there is a lot of hand-drawn elements.
Yeah.
Here,
It's funny. I feel like lettering has kind of taken over for drawing for me. I like to tell the story about how I grew up in a very religious family.
Oh, which religion are you from?
Non-denominational.
Okay.
Again, yeah. And one of the things I was able to do during Sunday sermon was draw. And I was allowed to draw like the pastor and like the choir. But then my favorite thing to draw was like ads. And I have reams of these. I love to like the Sunday circulars you would get in the paper, like for, JCPenney or Kmart and I would just draw ads, and there was always a type element to them. So I feel like I was designing even like designing at a young age, where I would figure out where the type was going to go, where the sweater was going to go, where the type explaining what the sweater was, made of and how much it cost, and just kind of figuring out all that. And I loved lettering all the logos and kind of like splashy 80s kind of, so I feel like I was kind of paying attention to type since I was very young.
Interesting. So you were probably like internalizing all these like design elements.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I was very much thinking like a designer, which I think a lot of kids who draw are obviously designing. That's part of what you do when you're creating a page, is you're designing it.
Yeah.
But I feel like I was thinking of it from like an advertising marketing perspective, which is very weird. So yeah, I would sit in church and draw the Sunday ads that I had seen that morning while looking at the paper while eating breakfast.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been thinking about type for a really long time. Now I just really enjoy experimenting with it, experimenting with readability and kind of pushing those boundaries.
Did you ever go and fire guns with Gary?
I did. I went on the very last shooting party, and I'm very, very glad that I did. I'm very glad. So it was me, Josh Simmons, and Simon Hanselman.
Oh my God. Was it scary?
Was it scary? There was definitely some times when it was like, wow, everyone here is really stoned and there's a lot of guns being shot. But the funny thing, I don't know if the funny thing is that we just like, it started getting dark, and all the stuff we brought to shoot was just, it was just disarray. It was just like old copiers and like pieces of metal and so many Arizona iced tea jugs, and it was getting dark, and we were like, we got to get out of here because we don't really know where we're going, and we have to catch the light. And so we just drove and left it all. I like to think Gary went back and picked it all up later.
I'm sure he did.
Yeah.
I would be really scared to go. I'd be scared just to see Simon Hanselman with a gun. For one thing.
Oh yeah, it was just all selfies, like.
Oh my God. Yeah. You're really into lettering. Like, do you, is that something that you just kind of notice everywhere you go? Like if you're in a grocery store?
Oh yeah. I always joke, like when I go overseas, like on a vacation, I come back and I look at my pictures and it's all lettering. It's just all lettering.
What about like, do you ever go to like cemeteries and look at the headstones?
Oh yeah. Beautiful. Like, and the fact that it was all chiseled, like some of the fluidity and how they work within the rigidity of the form comes up with some really cool, beautiful olds. Yeah.
That was what I did today. Was I went to there's this African American cemetery here, not too far off from my house. That's from the 1800s. Mm-hmm. And I went in there and just looked, and because they were also such poor people, seeing what the designs that they came up with, like a lot of it was like handmade headstones. Some were they would just get bricks and cement bricks together and then carve the person's name out of the brick.
Suzanne Dawkins.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing stuff. And I found because we were on the highway, we were driving past this cemetery, and then it's just like a field, like past train tracks. And I just noticed looking out the window one time, there was like a little headstone out there. I was like, whoa, the cemetery goes out that far? That's weird. So I went today and went past the train tracks, and there was like a dead deer on the train tracks. It got hit and stuff. It was like really spooky. And I'm like walking through this field, and there's like homeless encampments and stuff. And I get in and I could see there was like, I saw like 3 or 4 old headstones sticking up in this field from the 1800s.
Wow.
That were all handmade from this family. They were just called every one of them said like Beecham on it. Like that was the last name.
Right.
They were just totally forgotten in the middle of this field. And apparently when I came home and I researched it, it was like a potter's field. Like they were just like, there's a lot of unmarked African-American graves in this field before the city decided to finally give them this other field, which is now what people know of as the
official. Right.
So yeah, so this other, it's like 6 acres and it's all overgrown and crazy, like really hilly and stuff from before the river. Pretty incredible to see like the solutions they had for like games and stuff, and like it's like very folksy, like, you know.
Well, yeah, and just looking at the history of how people have marked their beloved dead, and you know, I don't know if you've ever seen in New Zealand, they still had these. They're like a bell jar, a glass encasing kind of bowl almost, and then underneath will be some artificial flowers. And then the bowls are just filled with like moss and mildew, and the flowers underneath are really just like, you know, sun bleached and kind of spiky. But it was the whole idea, like, you know, this is preserving this piece of beauty forever, you know, under this glass piece, and they would just be sitting on top of like next to the gravestone. Right.
So it's like really interesting to me to come down here and it's like, and it's old, you know, it's like, you know, coming from Colorado, especially where like the oldest thing you'll find is like 1890s.
Right. And that's exciting.
Oh wow, somebody put this brick wall up back in like 1898. I can't believe it.
Right.
But like, you know, down here, there's like stuff from like the 1700s, and there's the state capitol has like a cannonball marks on it from when the Civil War was happening and stuff. And yeah. All right, I'm gonna let you go. I really appreciate that you gave me this time, though.
Yeah. We probably should have talked more about your books, but you know.
Oh, it doesn't. I'm not. Who cares?
Who cares?
I'm gonna edit it so we're only talking about my books.